Okay, now we get to the fun stuff. So we've gone over all of the basics. So we've seen what you usually would do with editor sequence and editor frame, editor sprite functions. Now we get into how we can leverage them to our advantage to use them as fake globals, as extra global variables to store information without actually declaring a global variable. So here's the thing. If we have a sprite on a screen, again, I'm just going to use the pillbug, and I'm going to use the script sprnum. Delete that script and start again. Now, if we have a sprite on a screen and we use editor sprite functions, but we don't use them as their intended use, taking note of the information earlier that all of these editor sprite numbers and all of that editor information always exists, whether or not a sprite exists, we can use that information to store whatever we want and retrieve it whenever we want. I'm going to go over just how to do it, just confined to a screen for now, and then we'll get into the more advanced stuff later. So when we do this trick, I'm going to add a talk procedure here. Let's start with retrieving the editor sprite number using and hold. And that is an equals sign after and hold. It just looks like a hyphen because of my recording. Now we always want to make sure when we use this trick that the editor type of the editor sprite number we're working with is 0. It has to be 0 for this to work, which is a normal sprite drawn on the screen. And that's because with a lot of these other sprite numbers, well, it's either going to kill the sprite off, so we won't be able to ever retrieve the number again, or a lot of the times when you're working with one of these, the script won't actually execute anymore on the sprite when you come back. It has to be editor type 0. I always type editor type 0 in the main procedure when I'm working with this trick, just to make sure. Sorry, this is supposed to be we want this to be the main procedure. By the way, change this to main procedure. So once we enter the screen, we're storing the editor sprite number and making sure its editor type is 0 straight off the bat. Now, let's add a talk procedure. And let's say make freeze dink, say stop, hi pillbug, wait 200, say stop, hi dink, make the pillbug say that, and then let's store some information so we know we've already had this conversation. So we already know the editor sprite number stored in and hold. Now, let's change the editor seek of and hold to just 1. Now, here we're just storing the value 1 in editor seek. It's not going to have any effect, of any visual effect at all on the sprite because we haven't set one of these special editor types that makes the sprite do anything. Its editor type is 0, so it's just the normal sprite drawn on the screen. All we're doing is we're leveraging editor seek to store a value. So Ding's gonna have this conversation with the pillbug. Editor seek's gonna be changed to 1. I'm gonna unfreeze Dink. Now, in the main procedure up here, I'm gonna add another local variable here called int, and we'll just call it val1. It doesn't matter what it's called. It stands for value 1, and that's not I forgot the ampersand sign there. Int and val1 equals editor seek and hold -1. So basically what this means is we're retrieving the editor sequence of this editor sprite number and hold, and it's being stored in nval1. So when we walk on the screen, we're retrieving that. Now let's do something here. We'll say if nval1 equals 1, which we know that this is not going to equal 1 unless this conversation here has been run, because then that's when the editor sequence of 1 will be stored in the editor sprite number. So when that's stored, the player leaves, comes back. That's when this will run this section here because there's now 1. And we can just have the pillbug say hi again, Dink, you're back. And now if we go in here, this isn't, we've got to make sure the script is attached. Save the dmod and play it. We go up, talk to the pillbug. Hi pillbug, hi Dink. And now it unfreezes me. If I leave and come back, he's going to say, hi again Dink, you're back. And we've just achieved that using just editor sequence information. We've taken leverage of the information that we can store in editor sprite numbers without using a global variable. And that is the basics of this trick. Now, there's a few things I need to touch on here. I need to go a little bit more in depth. Obviously, let's just say if you're working with editor sprite numbers directly, so you're not retrieving it with and hold. Let's say you're referring to the numbers directly, so in this case it would be editor sprite 1. Because some people do this, and it's okay to do this as long as you know that sprite numbers aren't going to change. Whoops. So we're working with editor sprite 1 here. I've got rid of and hold and I've changed it all to editor sprite 1. And this is all still going to work fine. Because we're referring to the editor sprite number directly. Now, it doesn't matter what editor sprite number we save this information in. The point is we're just saving information somewhere so we can retrieve it again. For all we care, we could save this information in editor sprite 99. So let's restart the game. It's still going to be stored in 99. We're going to retrieve it from 99, and that number still exists, even if a sprite doesn't exist assigned to that slot. So we're going to talk to the pillbug. It's going to store editor seek value of 1 in editor sprite 99, and when we come back, it's going to retrieve that information. Still going to work. Now, this leads me on to another point. If you're storing editor sprite information and using this trick, you need to make sure that you're not trying to use this trick on an editor sprite number that has like a normal barrel or chest. Sorry, that's not a normal barrel, half broken. A normal barrel or chest already assigned to that number, because in normal chest and barrel scripts, they make use of editor type values, editor sequence, and editor frame values so that when Dink returns, the barrel or chest will remain open. So you've got to be careful because it will break this trick. So for instance, let's just attach a script to this by E, because that'll just use the normal barrel empty script. So if I play this dmod now, and that's still saving the values in sprite 99, that's fine. That's an empty barrel. That, when it gets broken, it's using editor type 3, draw sequence and frame as a background without hardness, to save that information, so that barrel will always be an open barrel as a background when we come back. Now, so if we take the editor sprite number of that barrel, which is 2, and we try to save all of this information in editor sprite 2, it's gonna cause some havoc, because it's already using the normal intended use of editor type, editor seek, and editor frame in order to display its barrel stuff. So, for instance, if I do this now, come back, hi, you're back again, Dink. Guess what? If I break this barrel, now look what's happened. It's really causing some havoc with the barrel. It's also made it so the conversation with the pill bug doesn't happen when I've left and come back. And basically that's because both of these sprites are trying to access and change editor sprite information for editor sprite 2. So you just need to make sure there's no conflict there when you're using this trick. You obviously just need to make sure you're not trying to change information on a sprite that's already going to want to change and access that information. So armed with that information, you can see how you can use editor sprite information as an extra sort of variable within a screen. And you can use all of the editor sprite numbers that you want, all of their information, even if you have a fully decorated screen of like trees here, bookshelves, whatever, grass, it doesn't matter. All of these sprites can even have scripts attached and function their own way with conversations, variable changing, whatever. And you can have information being stored inside all 99 editor sprite slots and then retrieve it again when you come back. It's not going to interfere with any of these sprites if they're not using editor sprite information, as long as they're not like a chest or a barrel or whatever. So that when you think about that, how much information you can store on a single screen is quite a lot. It's quite vast, and you can definitely take leverage of that. That's another 99. You can think of that as 99 globals per screen. And this brings me to my next point, actually using editor seek and editor frame as globals. So the way I've showed previously, you'd only be able to set and retrieve this information within that screen. It's only confined to one screen. You can actually use editor seek and editor frame as globals and retrieve them from a screen remotely, no matter which screen you're on as well. And the screen, just as I said earlier, the numbers, editor sprite numbers are already there. The sprites don't have to exist, but also the screen doesn't have to exist. So see over here, this is screen 337. It doesn't exist. It still has 99 editor sprite numbers, even though it hasn't been created. So you can dedicate one single screen in your dmod to editor sprite information, and that gives you 99 extra free global variables effectively. In fact, it gives you a little bit more than that, because you have all of the editor seek here, which can store a maximum value of 65535, and you also have editor frame, which can store up to 255. So you sort of have, you can times it by 2 almost, 99 times 2, and that's how many globals you have. It's just the editor frame can only have a maximum value of 255. But even in normal dmods, I don't think that the end story value really goes that high, even in a full quest. Maybe in an epic it has the potential to, but still very unlikely. So let me demonstrate this ability here, this technique. I'm just going to use screen number 1. I'm not going to create it. We're just going to remember that we're going to use screen number 1 to store our information. Let's run through exactly the same situation as before. SPR num. Okay, now this is going to be obviously a little bit more in depth. It might seem a bit confusing, but that's why I went over everything previously before this. If you understand all the previous stuff I've gone over, this won't be that confusing. So what we're going to do is, rather than storing the editor information on this screen with editor sprite numbers on this screen, we're going to store them all in player map number 1. The way we're going to do this, we're going to need a few variables. So first of all, we'll ignore this main procedure for now, and we'll come down here to the talk procedure and we'll sort out the storing first, because we know that we're going to want to store a value here, so we know this conversation has taken place. Now, we're going to need a few local variables, so I am going to declare them earlier in the script so they can be used. So we'll come back up here for a second, and I'm going to put int and old map int and save value. And I think that actually might be all that we need. Let's see. Hey guys, this is me editing in post, just adding something in. We don't actually need the local variable end save value up there. We only need end old map. I didn't realize at the time, and it sits there the whole video, but doesn't actually get used. So you don't need to declare that second local variable. Okay, let's continue. So if we come down here, and what we want to do is we want to first of all save whichever player map we're currently on, so we don't lose this information. So we're going to go end old map equals end player map. So we're now saving the current map in local variable and old map. Then we want to change the player map to the map that we want to retrieve the information from. In this case, it's map number 1. Then we want to, once we in map number 1, we want to retrieve we're actually storing the value in one of the editor sprite numbers. So we can just use editor sprite number 1. We can start there. So we can do editor seek 1, 1. So we're storing the value 1 in editor sprite number 1. And this is for player map number 1. Then, after we've stored that value, we need to change the player map back to the original map, which is stored in an old map. And then that's it. That's all we have to do. Now, this might seem a little bit odd at first glance to someone that's never used this technique before, because you might be thinking, well, hang on, we're changing the player map. Isn't that going to mess with some things? But it actually doesn't. It doesn't mess with things at all. The player can be in the middle of battle spamming attacks and magic, and you can run this and it won't affect the current screen. And that's because when you change the player map, a visual change doesn't actually take effect at all unless you do draw screen and also load screen. Mainly draw screen, but obviously load screen is going to do some stuff as well. But if you don't declare load screen or draw screen, there'll be no visual change at all. And all that will happen, because there's no wait in here and the way that DingC scripts work, is this is all going to happen at once. It's going to load up all the editor information for player map 1. It's going to store the value 1 in editor sprite 1, and then it's going to load back all the editor information for the current map. But that's before this script even finishes executing. So then once this script finishes executing, everything else is still going to work as normal. There's going to be no visual change because we didn't do load screen, draw screen. And all that's happened is we've saved this information into editor sprite 1 of screen 1. So now up here we need to retrieve it. And the way we retrieve it is very similar to this. We can just copy this. We can paste this here in place of where this is. So we're still doing an old map equals and player map equals 1. And we want to do editor seek 1, -1 to retrieve it. But we want to save this. So this is where we want our nval1 to be. So now we're storing the editor sequence of editor sprite 1 in map 1 inside local variable nval1, so this can still happen. Now let's load the daemon up. And it should work exactly as it did before. And there'll be no visual change. So talk to this. Hi Pillbug. Hi Dink. Come back. Hi again Dink, you're back. As you can see, there's no visual change and we're still able to use that information as a global. But all of this information is being stored in screen number 1 sprite 1 Because as I said, every sprite number is there whether there's a sprite on that screen or not. So that's how you can use that in order to take leverage of editor sprite information as true globals. Anyway, that was a comprehensive tutorial on editor sprite information and how you can use it to your advantage in order to create free globals with it, store information for free with it, retrieve it. And I hope this wasn't confusing. I hope it was clear enough. If you have any questions, please ask. And thanks for watching.